Welcome to this introduction on pain perception and opiates. Throughout this video, we will discuss how humans perceive pain and how opiates prevent pain. First, we will discuss the pathway a message of pain undergoes. Here I am drawing the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord. The spinal cord plays an important role in relaying information to the brain from the peripheral nervous system. So now we are going to take a look at the structure of the spinal cord. 3 membranes surround the actual spinal cord: the pia mater, the arachnoid, and the dura mater, which are collectively known as the meninges. I am now drawing the 3 separate layers of the spinal cord. After I finish drawing the 3 membranes, I will draw a butterfly-shaped gray matter in the center of the spinal cord. The circular shape is the central canal, which contains cerebrospinal fluid and is important for both spinal cord and brain function. The fibers being drawn at the front of the spinal cord are known as motor fibers. They carry information away from the spinal cord. The fibers connecting at the back are known as sensory fibers, which transmit messages to the spinal cord and then up to the brain. We will primarily focus on the sensory fibers as they aid in sending the message of pain from your peripheral nervous system to the central nervous system in the brain. Now that we have discussed the anatomy of the spinal cord, let's see how it aids in the perception of pain. So let's say that a needle has penetrated the skin in the trunk area. There are specialized neurons called nociceptors that register this stimulus. There are 2 types of nociceptors. The first are the alpha-delta fibers, which are small myelinated neurons that produce fast and well-localized sharp pain. The C fibers are smaller and unmyelinated and produce a burning or throbbing pain. When a noxious stimulus, such as the needle, is present, chemicals will be released by the immune system. This will stimulate an action potential in the nociceptors. The nociceptors will then transmit the message to the back of the spinal cord, which is also known as the dorsal horn. Remember that the sensory fibers feed into the back of the spinal cord, as in the last diagram. Here, the nociceptors will release neurotransmitters that transmit the message of pain. A second-order neuron will receive this message and then cross over inside the spinal cord to the opposite side. The second-order neuron will then bring the pain information through the spinal cord to the brain via the spinothalamic tract, which ends in the thalamus of the brain. The thalamus is known as the relay station of the brain. It will then synapse with the somatosensory cortex, which is responsible for processing sensation or external stimuli from the environment. Specific regions in the somatosensory cortex correspond to a specific area in the body. When the thalamus synapses with the region responsible for sensation in the trunk area, the individual will perceive a sharp pain in their abdomen. Now that we have talked about how we perceive pain, let's look at the structure of opiates and how they affect the body. Opiates are a class of drug that mimic endorphins. Opiates such as morphine and oxycodone are known for their powerful pain-killing abilities and used for moderate to severe pain as well as chronic pain. We will quickly examine the chemical structure of different opiates, which are derived from the sap of the opium poppy. They all possess analgesic or pain-relieving effects. From a chemistry view, they all belong to the alkaloid family, have multiple rings, and contain nitrogen. Morphine is the most common alkaloid that is naturally occurring in the opium poppy. It manages severe to moderate pain and is often administered through an IV after surgery. Morphine can be converted to codeine and heroin through the addition of a methoxy group in codeine and an ester group in heroin. The difference in structure gives the chemicals different properties. The OH group in morphine makes it much more polar than the other opiate substances. Since it is polar, this prevents morphine from passing through the blood-brain barrier. Heroin and codeine are less polar due to their methoxy and acetyl groups. Since the brain is fatty, less polar molecules can pass better through the blood-brain barrier. Once codeine and heroin pass through the blood, they are able to be hydrolyzed back to morphine, which dissolves well into blood. This is because blood is polar and can easily dissolve other polar molecules such as morphine. Now that we have talked about the chemical structure of opiates, let's examine how we prevent the feeling of pain. Opiates mimic a type of neurotransmitter called endorphins. Endorphins are naturally produced during periods of stress, fear, or pain. They predominantly act on receptors in the brain and block the action potential that will signal pain. Recall that neurotransmitters are chemicals that pass along signals from one neuron to the next. So let's say that this is one of the neurons in the brain from our last example. The presynaptic neuron is attempting to synapse with a postsynaptic neuron in the somatosensory cortex. The message or action potential will signal the feeling of pain. This action potential pushes vesicles of neurotransmitters such as endorphins to the synaptic cleft or space between the neurons. Here the endorphins are released into the synaptic cleft and then bind to the receptors on the postsynaptic neuron. In order for this to occur, the docking of the endorphins at their receptor will hyperpolarize the postsynaptic neuron by stimulating the ion channels to allow positively charged potassium ions to flow out and negatively charged chlorine ions to flow in. This makes the membrane potential even more negative. In this example, changing it from negative 70 millivolts to negative 72 millivolts. Hyperpolarization makes it more difficult for other neurotransmitters trying to send the pain message to depolarize the neuron. Endorphins are inhibitory as they inhibit the transmission of the message or the neuron's ability to depolarize. Opiates are a class of drugs that mimic endorphins. They are able to bind to the same receptors on the postsynaptic neuron. Therefore, they will also block pain messages. This is because the receptors are like a lock and key. Since both endorphins and opiates are similar in structure, they both fit in the same lock and hyperpolarize the neuron. If opiates, such as morphine, are used too much, it will desensitize the receptors on the postsynaptic neuron. Over time, there will be less receptors for endorphins and opiates to bind with. Therefore, the individual will most likely begin to increase their dosage of the opiate to achieve the same pain-killing effects. This contributes to the eventual dependence and addiction to opiates.